welcome to Off the Court, and in perfect timing, Fumi Fadoja just ran past me and you won't be able to hear a thing. We're at the Copper Box. London Pools have just beaten Surrey Storm 58-53 in round 13 of the Netball Super League, and it is so loud in here. The atmosphere has been electric. 2,500 fans came out of the sunshine and in the Copper Box to watch that game. So we're going to persevere with this noise. There's going to be lots of turning and lots of mic holding up to their noses. But listen, I'm joined here by player of the match, Beth Dix for Surrey Storm. Didn't quite get the win today, but on 31 feeds was exceptional in that feeding position. And of course, no introductions needed for Berri, Neil, England Rose, and starting goal attack for London Pools. Welcome, ladies.
Hiya.
Right, we want to have a little talk about the game today, firstly, because it was absolutely brilliant. Surrey Storm just wouldn't go away. And Beth, how relentless are you guys as a team at the moment, and how do you feel you can get over the line?
Yeah, I mean, we've had a lot thrown at us this week, so I really feel like we had quite a grit in our belly and fire in our belly this week. And you just have to, if we want to make top 4 team, you've got to have that relentlessness.
And Berri, you've had a couple of games that have gone down to the wire. What is it about this London Pools team that keeps getting across the line?
I think we just really enjoy a close game, to be honest. I think we get a little bit of a buzz off it. I mean, as a team, we would much rather have a more consistent performance, which means that we can go ahead a little bit earlier on. But I think that we just all really want to win so bad, and we really want to get in the top 4 and play in the semis and finals. So when it does get close at the end, we just know we have to keep pushing on.
I spoke a lot in commentary about the fearlessness of teams, and Surrey Storm was steady tonight. They were controlled, they were steady. You guys had moments where you were totally fearless and then moments where the ball flew off the back line. How hard is it as attacking players who are on the ball a lot, who like to open up the game, to stay controlled in the big moments?
Yeah, I mean, it comes with time, and you've just got to stay in it. Like you say, you've got to have that control and know when to release it on the first second and know when to wait for it to open up and release it on the third. So yeah.
We saw a bit of an unfamiliar lineup for London Pools at the start of the game. It really changed, I guess, when Jay Clark came back into centre and the Galish goals went back into wing attack. Did you notice that effect of the change?
I think we've obviously had a few injuries in the squad, and Jade's just coming back, which is so good to see. I mean, it goes without saying how much experience she's got, so having her come into the team in such an intense moment was really helpful. But I even think the starting 7 with Nicole on offers something completely different, and I think that's what we're aiming for, that whatever combo we put on can bring something different to the side.
Well, you both mentioned their experience, obviously, with Jay Clark, and then Beth, you mentioned sort of having time and understanding the big moments when you're out there, and you can only get that by playing. Now, I'm going to disclose your ages. We've got 21, yeah, and then Beth, who went, oh, I turned 26 yesterday.
Thank God you didn't do me.
Yeah, I mean, Eboni, we don't want to do me, because that gets even worse at that point. But you know that the young players we've seen coming through the league, and Storm have been forced into some of those changes with injuries. Pools have been, that's been their sort of theme over the last few seasons, to bring youngsters through. How big are your aspirations then as young players? How exciting is it to get that opportunity? Being in front of 2,500 people today and just going, go on, give me the ball, let me show you what I can do.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. That's what you want, the big moments. That's literally what you train for week in, week out. I mean, if you want to thrive and you want to get into top 4 and make that team, then that's exactly what you've got to do. You've got to love it and live in it and just soak it all up.
Has this always been your dream, to win a Super League, potentially? Obviously, you're representing the Roses at the moment in time, to win international honours with them as well?
Yeah, I mean, when Tamsin just said about how aspirational do you have to be, I live with list goals, and we're always talking about how we're going to win a World Cup one day, and even though it might seem far away now, I think you've got to have that belief. I think you're stupid to be in this league if you don't want to win it. I think you've always got to go for gold no matter what, so yeah.
Well, look, we've had loads of questions in for you two. There's one in a minute that I'm not sure I'm cool enough to say, but I'll give it a go. But the first one from Rachie Robb, she says, which shooters have been your biggest aspirations?
I mean, growing up as a Manchester Thunder fan, living in Manchester, I'd have to say Helen Housby. I remember going to games when I was 12, and I was at the game where she scored the last shot in the final and they won. So she's always been such a big inspiration for me. But I think all of the England girls that have gone over to SSN, just seeing how their careers have developed when they've gone out there is really inspiring.
Go on then, is SSN the plan?
I mean,
I love doing this to them.
I I mean, I think like every player would love to play over there. It's the best league in the world, and I'm really hoping that Super League can be like that, and we can be in a position where we can just do netball full time and focus on that. But I think at the minute SSN is the place to be.
Absolutely, even if for the tan alone, right? Look, I'll give you your fun question first. Gia Abernethy, who you played with at Sirens for a long time, she said, Beth, who do you prefer at centre, me or your coach?
Oh, God. Gia! How am I going to answer that?
You have to.
Do I need... I can't sit on the fence, no. I don't know if I do the safe answer or not. I'm going to say Mickey, my current Super League coach.
You're safe because she is back out. Oh no, she's back in England, but she's been out to us, so you're safe with that one. Listen, a serious question then. Your name gets thrown around every year as a wing attack potential for England. Is that still a big aspiration? Is it something we're aiming for every season, or is it not? Because not everybody wants that international career as well.
I mean, I'd love to play for England. I won't hide it. I want to be the best player I can be, and obviously, who wouldn't want to play for their country? But obviously, my current focus is Super League. I want to make a top 4. This is the highest I've sat in a team in the league so far. So I'm just pushing to make top 4 and be the best player I can be. And if I can be like Berri when I grow up, then that would be great.
Wouldn't we all like to be Berri? Eboni, I want to touch on the youngsters then. We've got so many around the country. Is it getting harder and harder now to break into that Roses programme?
I think it is getting harder and harder. I think for years we talked about the England Roses pathway and how it needs to be strengthened, but it's great to see young talent playing the likes of these types of close-knit games and the talent we have spread across the league. I think netball really is thriving, and as we move to this new format, moving into 2025, it's going to be great to see the showcase of talent that we have, because the results of the Roses last year, especially at the World Cup, I think it's really kind of unearthed new talent. It's made people excited. It's made youngsters want to play in a World Cup, and I just hope that it continues to go from strength to strength.
I love that little story of you and Liz dreaming about winning the World Cup. I mean, that is so... I'm picturing you in the garden. Berri's putting up the winning shot of the World Cup final. I'm dreaming this is going to happen, by the way. Quick mention on Darcy Everett today, coming on debut season. She's had some opportunities, but she was impressive.
Yeah, and I think that's what really London Pulse is really good for, like bringing in the youngsters, and she's been ready to get court time for a long time now, so being given that opportunity is so good for her, and she did an amazing job, and I think when you've got Fumi in front of you, it definitely helps. So.
Well, listen, this is the question I'm going to try and deliver. This is from Taylor McKevitt, who's a regular on our Off the Court. I love these, Tay. So this is, well, you can both answer this one because I've got no chance. So this is never slay again or slay every day for the rest of your life, but the slay has lost all meaning.
Slay every day.
Slay every day, all day.
Eboni?
I'm just not down with the cool kids. So.
Hey, I'm slaying every day. I'm with them. I'm with the dream team here. Listen, you guys were exceptional tonight. It was a very entertaining game. You did not disappoint. Look, we're looking forward into the next few weeks to seeing who is in the Roses programme moving forward, and also looking forward to seeing how you guys go forward. Trying to get into finals, obviously looks pretty likely you're going to be in there. Eboni, any takers on who's going to be in that grand final this year?
Pulse, and if Storm win the next couple.
Oh, what?
You're putting me on the spot.
This show
I'm in good company.
This show is not about the fence. That's all I'm saying. Well, listen, if you're watching us live on YouTube, do not forget to check out our podcast. But if you are listening to us, then stay tuned for our next guest. Our special guest today, arguably one of the most fearless players ever to play the game. It's Sharni Norder Layton. Actually, before I even begin, what am I calling you now? Sharni Norder, Sharni Layton.
It is Sharni Norder in this day and age, but I think Sharni Layton is still my stage name. You know, people know me as that. So whenever I do clinics or appearances, I'm just like, leave it at Layton. It's all good. But yeah, whatever you want to call me, I'm all good. Oh, gee.
Well, I love this. We put out a request for our Off the Court. We've been doing a few this season, a weekly podcast. And when we put out who people wanted to hear from, your name popped up so many times, Sharni. And I think that is this huge credit to who you are, because you haven't actually played since 2018, and yet you are still one of the most engaging, fantastic players that have ever graced our courts, and that people want to hear from. Do you still feel like that in Australia? Does that happen?
Absolutely not. No. It's like, it was so lovely to hear that, because I've been retired Oh my gosh, nearly 6 years now from netball. And I am starting to, I don't know how you felt in retirement, but it's been quite a hard process and transition and finding your identity outside of the sport. But to know that people still think of me is just so heartwarming, because when you give your whole life to something, it's really nice that it's remembered, because it doesn't have to be. So yes, very heartwarming.
Well, you certainly are. And I'm sure once you started talking, I didn't even need to introduce you because you're so recognisable when you start chatting, Sharni. Obviously, played for the Diamonds for countless years, but let's just talk about where you have been since you've come from the court. So a lot has happened. You stopped playing netball. You took up AFL. Went and played for
Yep.
Collingwood. You just made it into the All Stars team, as you do. You wrote
Yep.
a book. You started coaching. You got married. Is Sharni Layton's life ever dull?
Oh, do you know what? It's crazy, because to me, any time that I'm away from a team sport does seem dull. And that has been one of the hardest transitions, because there's always so much going on when you're in a team sport. You're always traveling, you're always at training, you're always managing your body, you're always managing what you eat. There's always injuries or things that are going on, or dramas within the sport, whether it be netball or AFL. Which is the women's sport, football. So for me, I've actually taken my foot off the pedal, and I'm trying to live a quieter lifestyle, and I stay out of the limelight these days. I don't really work in media anymore. And, but I really enjoy that. I'm really enjoying my downtime and I think that I'm maturing, Tamsin. I think
Don't ever grow
I
up.
don't know. I don't know.
Don't do it.
Yeah, but for me, I feel like my life is dull, but I'm happy with that. Like, I'm really happy with that. But people from the outside look in and they're like, you're always doing so much. And I'm like, but that's less than what I would usually do. So I'm always going to be active. I'm always going to be moving and doing a million different things. It's the ADHD in me. I'm just like, but it keeps me happy being on the move.
Yeah, I can safely say, having followed you on Instagram for a long time, it doesn't ever look dull. You're always off traveling or doing. But I know what you mean about when you're involved in a sport, and especially a team sport, and when you're training and touring, it's so time consuming, right? And it's such a way of life that there's never a part where you sit still. And I'm guessing now you have some weekends back and some time back where you're like, oh, this is what happens on an evening when I don't have to train, or I don't have to get up and do this match.
Yeah, and do you know what? It started off that way, and then I started coaching, as you said, probably about 4 or 5 years ago now. I got into like schools, and I love grassroots. Like, for me, grassroots is where it's at in netball, like the passion, the amount of people that play it, boys and girls, and they just play it because they love it. Like, you don't have the pressure and the seriousness of professional netball. So for me, I actually went straight back into Saturday netball, because I'm down at the courts all day on a Saturday. I was working in the city. I live about an hour out of Melbourne. And I was working in the city the last 4 years. And this year I was like, you know what? I do need some more time to myself. So I got a new job at another school, but closer to home. But because I was closer to home, I took on another 2 coaching jobs, and now I coach every morning and every night. And I just think I wouldn't know how to keep a clear schedule if it hit me in the face. Like, if there is, you know what it's like being an athlete. If there's an hour free, I will fill it.
You'll fill it.
Yeah, you can always fill it.
I feel it. Well, listen, I want to talk about this netball journey then, because earlier on the show we heard from a young England Rose, Berri. You might not have seen her play yet or know much about her, but you'd love her. She's a goal attack. She loves the baseline drive, Sharni. I mean, you two would match up. It would have been a perfect matchup actually on the court. But we talked to her about SSN. Is that still the goal? And it's so funny because all our young players over here, that's still the ultimate, the game, to play out in the SSN. I know you were involved from the very beginning. I was out there in the first couple of years when it started. Back then, did you know how special the SSN, well, the ANZ that turned into the SSN was going to be? Did it feel like a moment back then in Australia?
I think the moment for us was when we went from a national league, which was Commonwealth Trophy, and when we first turned into ANZ champs. For us, that was the moment that we went semi-professional. We went from getting $1,000 a year to minimum $10,000 a year. It was back in 2008. And what that allowed us to do in regards to being able to put more time and effort into our training and transform our bodies into being athletes, because arguably netballers weren't athletes because we didn't have, whilst you're in the gym twice a week and doing all of that, the fact that you didn't have time for your body to recover, you were working full time, studying full time, exhausted when you're playing. We just weren't seeing how much people could give because of how much they were giving outside of netball. So once that money started coming in during ANZ Champs, I think you saw a shift straight away. The fact that some athletes were training full time and they kind of went bang, and it was those Australian athletes because they were 6 months National League, 6 months Australian team. And they were playing 12 months of the year. But then there was a gap between them and the rest of us because we were playing 6 months of the year, but then working full time 6 months of the year. And that was really hard, and it made it so hard to crack into the Australian team because they were playing all year round. So you were expected to be just as good as them and play against them in the ANZ Champs, but we didn't have the ability to play as much netball as what they were playing or get paid as much as what they were getting paid. So therefore you were still more exhausted when you got to training. So even in the ANZ Champs, I was still working full time the first 5 years. I was a waitress, doggy daycare attendant, worked at a solar panel. I was a solar panel saleswoman for 2 years. So it was really hard for me. And I was actually doing that when I cracked into the Australian team. So I was fortunate, but it was hard because of how exhausted you were. But when we then went to Super Netball and we then got the 12-month contracts, and I know minimum 40 grand isn't heaps to live off, but it still allowed every athlete that little bit more time training 12 months a year. And I think that's what's then separated Super Netball again from the ANZ Champs.
Well, it's really interesting because you talk about that transition and the amount of time it took. And I was there at the beginning, so I saw that kind of first change. And interestingly, now in England, in the UK, we're going professional with our league. But those steps, yeah, exactly. But those steps you're talking about, it doesn't just magically change overnight. Following your path, because you were very young when it all started to happen, you were prepared to change clubs, like you said, you were prepared to change jobs, you were doing all different things. If you look back at it now and you're offering advice to some of our players over here, because our other guest that we had on was Beth Dix, and she was talking about still ambitions to play for England, but she's in that catch-22, right, where she can't train as much, she's not getting the same funding. She's only 26, so there's still ample time, and it almost feels over the hill. Like, what are some of those probably nuggets as the league shifts now in England that if you look back going, yeah, if I'd have done that, or if I could have been given that advice, it would have made such a big difference?
I think you just have to be so smart with your training. I think when you go professional, a lot of people, even when they're young, think more is more, but it's not. Making sure that your weight sessions, you're doing them at the right time, making sure that you're fueling yourself properly so your body's getting that recovery if you're still having to go to work in between, making sure that you're getting absolutely everything out of your training sessions while you're there. And if your coaches are now full-time, which was a big difference, once upon a time the coaches were working so you didn't have access to them, you now have the access to a coach all year round. So if you're like, okay, great, I need to come in and do an extra session. How do I get better? Can we do an extra session before training? Can we do an extra session after training? Can I come in for an extra hour and do that video analysis? What are those extra things that you're doing to make yourself better? Even though it's hard work, you sacrifice other things in your life to give everything you've got a go. And I think that was always my motto, that if I do everything I can and I don't make it, that's okay. But I did everything I could and doors kept on opening because I found a way to challenge that. So for me, it's about, still finding a way to do those extras even though you're not paid for it yet. It's not about going, I'm not getting paid for it. AFLW is in a similar position over here. You've got girls who are going, well, I'm not getting paid for that, so I'm not doing it. It's like, but if you want to be your best, you just have to. And if you're being your best and you're bringing the game up by being better, then everything else will follow. The commercial value will follow. Other girls will follow, and you can get a bit more of a trend going with that. So that would be my advice. Like, it's not just about what you're doing on the court, it's about what you're doing off the court, but also how you're recovering, when are your off days, and that's all just as important as it as well.
I think that shows, sort of your unique way as well. And I totally get it. And when I look at the players that have made it around the world, and and the players that have absolutely thrived, they all have that part of them, that part where they're prepared to do the extra, they're prepared to think differently, to want to take it. And I love what you talked about there about it's not just about you, it's about how it's going to take the rest of the sport forward. That was such a big shift for Aussie netball, because it not only took the Aussie Diamonds forward, it also took the rest of the world forward. Has that been really noticeable over the last few years, just how much impact Aussies have had across the world?
Oh, I just love it. I love that. I love, that we're seeing everyone everywhere. Like there's Aussies in Australia, New Zealand, the UK. There's English girls in the UK, probably New Zealand and Australia. And there's different pathways now, and it doesn't have to be a national pathway. I hope that that's being embraced. I know sometimes it can be like, don't play here, don't play there, blah, blah, blah. But I think that, if you haven't made one league and you've got an opportunity somewhere else, go. What can you learn? The different styles of play, different styles of leadership, different styles of everything. And the fact that you've now got amazing leagues around the globe and you have these other opportunities. It's not like when one door closes, that's it. And I think now, once upon a time, it was, when we were growing up, it was sit on the bench and do your time. I'm not necessarily a big advocate for that. I think there's a time and a place to be patient. But then I also think the only way that you're going to grow is by playing the game and getting more runs under your belt. And so if you get an opportunity to do that somewhere else, then I think you should go for it.
I want to talk about your journey then, because when you look at you on Wikipedia, right, you've won everything, you've done everything. You won World Youth Cup, you won Commonwealth Games, you won World Cup, you captained your country, you won the ANZ. I mean, you've literally nailed everything. But both you and I know it's never just the A to B transition. It's the bit that people see at the end of the career. But it's never like that. And for you especially, it's been a roller coaster with all things. I want to firstly touch on how you transitioned in the Diamonds, because I would say you were one of the first different types of players to come through. So I was playing for England when you first entered into the Diamonds, and we played against each other. You played at wing defence, I was on at wing attack. Yeah. I remember us having a moment on the edge of the circle. I think your words to me, "Oh mate, I snotted on your shoulder," and I was like, "What?" And yeah, it was hilarious.
Gross. I was so sick.
No, well, yeah, I know. I was there when I was getting nice attention on the edge of the circle, Sharni. But you burst onto this scene as this player that I'd never seen playing for Australia before. And you started out sort of wing defence, you were playing goal defence, but you ended up with your career making goalkeeper. That's where I remember you being special, like a proper leader, a game changer. How did that transition happen? And did you even know at the time that you were different? Because you were massively different for me as someone who loves the game coming into that Australian squad.
Yeah, definitely. I always felt different in the netball pathways from a teenager coming through. I think because I was just loud, probably a bit obnoxious at times, different personality. But I also I don't know, Dad just brought me up, kind of teaching me not to care what people think about you, just give your all. And I was a bit unorthodox. I was pretty unco when I first started playing, how I run, how I jumped. I copped a lot of criticism online on the online forums. Like I used to get called Melman, the giant giraffe. And it's really hard when you get trolled to put that to the back of your head. But I just knew that I was better than what people were saying I was when I was sitting on the bench for 6 years before I actually cracked onto the scene. And so you've just got to trust that belief in yourself to be able to quiet those other voices on the outside that don't actually know. Because I was like, well, if people didn't believe in me, then I wouldn't have made it this far. And I just kind of used that to fire me up, to keep me going. And then, the one thing that always got me into teams was that I did sit on the bench for 6 years before I started. And so I knew how to be a bench player. And I don't think a lot of people know how to be a good bench player. I don't think a lot of people know how to support others whilst pushing themselves as well. They can be jealousy, they can go quiet, they can sook. But for me, if my team's playing the best that they can and I'm not on the court and I can help them play better, then, that's better than sooking and getting dropped. Like you're still contributing even if you're not on the court. And then because I sat on the bench for 6 years before playing, when I did get on the court, I was like, well, I'm not going to let this go and I'm not going to let anyone else take my position because I know how hard I've worked to get here. So I think that resilience taught me not to care, and I think I probably cared too much when I was younger, and I did have a bit of self-sabotage. And so once I got over that self-sabotage to just be that relentless player, like I remember Lisa Alexander said to me one day, like, Shans, I always need you in my toolkit whether you're on or off the court, because it's not just about getting myself up, it's about getting my teammates up as well. But with that, it is quite tricky, because at the end of the day, you do want to be playing. And I was never a starting 7 player for the Diamonds. Like, I did play goalkeeper, but Geitzy was the captain, and she was a fantastic captain. I think she had the longest winning streak for any Australian Diamonds captain. So, I just had to kind of cop that on the chin a bit. But it's not until I retired that I actually thought, well, you know what, I think my presence in that Australian team was more than just being on the court, because if I wasn't pushing, Geitzy as hard, or if I wasn't pushing Renee Ingles as hard, then perhaps we wouldn't have had that successful period that we had. But in regards to my own performance, that's why I always felt like I needed to stand out, because I needed people to see me to stay on the court.
It's quite interesting hearing it from you, because obviously from the outside you remember different things, and that team at that time was incredible. It was almost unbeatable. But then there was that shift. You'd stopped playing, and there was a few changes, and they went through the 2018 and 2019 Commonwealth Games and World Cup, and they didn't win gold. Like, it was unheard of, back to back, not winning gold. I mean, they lost 2 finals, I think, by like 1 goal. It was ridiculous, and it was like the biggest disaster in the world. And I was like, they were still incredible. But after that, we saw a real change, and not just a change in the way they wanted to play, but also the players they started to bring in. So Gretel came in. I mean, she's absolutely incredible. We've seen players like Jamie Lee Price. We saw Ash. We saw, we saw Courtney Bruce come in and own that goalkeeper, and different players again to probably the standard that had been so successful for so long. That sort of standard Aussie group that I would say were like a conveyor belt, that you have one player and you put on, and it was the same player, and they were just as good and just as fit and just as strong. So it's been quite interesting to see that change and the step up the Diamonds have made since that's happened. Is that something you've noticed? Is that something that you perhaps think it might have been different for you if that had happened during your time?
It's so interesting, isn't it, when you play and when you come and play, like, it's the same as, like, I'm good mates with Bianca Chatfield, and she just happened to play for Australia when Liz Ellis was playing. So we just had very similar experiences in that, but you appreciate the success that you had with that. But the one thing that I will say is, if you ever want an Australian team to play well, then off, because I'll never forget the very first tournament that we had with Geitzy as captain, and she was pretty young when she first got named captain, and I think it was a bit of a shock to everyone that was outside the team. And I'll never forget, Kath Harvey-Williams came in, and she just said, this playing group, you are perceived as weak. And I can't remember the other exact words, but just had a bit of a crack at us. And it just gave us the biggest rocket. Not that we were listening to it, but we were like, we're not like that at all, and we're going to show you. And then bang, that was, we went on for like over 20 games unbeaten. And then the same thing happened once we had those losses in 18-19. It was like everyone was just like, what's going on with Australian netball? You're not good enough. The coach is blah, blah, blah. Players are blah, blah, blah. And it's such a credit to themselves, because they just turned around and went, you know what, we're going to show you what we actually are made of. And so that resilience to find a way and a different playing style. And that's what it is. Like, you had your Norma Plummer generation with your Coxies, your Lizards, your Monia Gerards. Then we had the Lisa Alexander generation. And now we've got the Stacey Marinkovic. So, and if you look at all those generations, they're all different playing styles, but it just takes time for them to build and blend. And I think it's great now they've got that, and they've got that confidence in themselves for players to come in and out and know what their role is and play that, to not overcomplicate it, and to be able to shut out the outside noise is such an important part of being an elite athlete.
I want to just touch on that outside noise then, because we talk about the roller coaster. You had countless amounts of injuries. I think they kept you off the court for sort of 2 years. You talked about being that bench player, and it's actually interesting when I went through your stats, because I was like, again, the perception I have of you as an Aussie Diamond, and then you got 46 caps, which is still huge, right? It's huge, but you'd be expecting a player of your calibre to be up there sort of like 80, 90 whatever. And that isn't always the case for loads of reasons. But I also want to talk about that mental resilience, because you haven't hidden away from, you know, when you took time out and why you needed time out. But I want to touch base on a little bit you were talking about before, sort of the trolling and the perception of you and players. And I know that's something I really struggled with throughout my career, and actually when I got into the media as well, that I didn't become my unique self until I actually became a player coach and started coaching myself. And that sounds ridiculous, but I felt like for the first time ever I could play the way I wanted to play, and I wasn't being judged about this is what a wing attack should do and this is how I should do it. And I almost had the most amount of success molding myself into how I wanted to be. And for years I was desperately trying to play a style that didn't fit me and suit me, and I was being hammered for it a lot. I was a bit like a Marmite player, and I never understood why until I took a step back. And I just want to know about your resilience, because you've been through the ringer with it, but kind of how you've bounced back from that. And if you could look at it again, you know, what could you have changed, or what would have been helpful?
Yeah, it's so tough, Tamsin. I think about this all the time because I was so fixated on being the best that I could be that I compared myself to a version of me that didn't exist. Right? I wasn't comparing myself to Laura Geitz or Bianca Chatfield or Jiva Mentor or whoever. It was just, I know I can be better and I want to be better, and I'm going to keep comparing myself to that person. And the one thing that I was missing, because as you mentioned, so I had 47 caps. I say give players caps even if they don't get on the court, because you are still a part of the team. I would have been a centurion, hands down. Give us caps. We want our caps. Let's start a poll or something. I don't really know. But anyway, oh gosh, now I've distracted myself again.
Sorry.
What was I talking about before that?
We were talking about the resilience and the mental.
Yes, the resilience. So, yep. So I go, all right. I ended up with depression because I was so hard on myself for so long and nothing was good enough. So I never played in a gold medal match, ever. So World Cup come games, never played. So I played up to semi-finals, but I never graced the court in a final. So for me, I felt like a failure because I didn't achieve, whilst I've got the medals to say I was there, for me, I was a failure. And I think for me to go, like it wasn't until I took time off and had depression and got therapy, blah, 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 that I am really proud of being a part of those teams. And I know what I contributed to the teams. But at the time when I had depression, I couldn't see that. All I could see was that I haven't played and I'm not good enough. So then I go, well, if I was kinder to myself, if I wasn't as hard on myself, would I have played netball for longer? Because mentally I would have been a lot healthier and I probably could have played for a lot longer. But would I have been the player that I was if I didn't push myself as hard as what I did? So it's just that dilemma of you could never really have regret. And for me, I think that I would still rather, whilst I would change my perspective and not be as hard on myself to a certain degree, I still would want to be that player that I became because of what I believed that I could do. But I just couldn't do that for a longer period of time because what people didn't see when I was away from the court, that I was doing 2 to 3 extra gym sessions a week, that I was doing an extra footwork session a week to make sure that I was faster than everyone else, that I was doing extra video analysis every week. And when I retired and everyone was like, Shanzi, like, why are you retiring? And I was like, I just can't keep doing. So I took 6 months off for the depression and I didn't come back. I never got back to as good as what I was, but I also knew how hard it was to get there and I wasn't willing to do the work because I wasn't in a good place when I pushed myself that hard to get there. So it was between life and sport, and I chose life because of the position that I was in. And I also wasn't okay with not becoming the player that I used to be. So for me, the easiest thing and the healthiest thing for me to do was to walk away, which is why I walked away.
It's quite interesting because I work with youngsters now. I coach the under-19s at Surrey's, and I remember having a chat with them because they all want to make it, right? They all want to play for England. They all want to do this. And
sorry, my dog's just barking. Stickies, come here.
Fine. I usually have to do that to the kids, so you're all good. You crack on. But we talk about with the kids, and they all want to play for England. They all want the dream. They all want the shiny bit on top. And And I keep sort of saying to them, if that's the only reason you're playing, that's a really tough journey. That is a really tough journey, because even if you get there, once you get in, you want to stay in. And once you're staying in, you want to get on the court. And then when you're on the court, you want to stay on the court. And there's always someone else coming through. And actually, one of the things I reflect on the most is if I could do it again, I always say I would have enjoyed it. I would have tried to enjoy it more. Because I'm not sure I ever stepped back and went, oh, wow, I love that.
Totally.
How sad is that? I knew what I wanted to do from age 10. I got there and I'm not ever sure I went, wow, well done me. You know, never.
Yes.
And I think that's one of the big things. So now you're working with kids and you talk about the grassroots and how important. How much that level of enjoyment has to shine through in what you're doing now?
All of it. Totally. I just resonate so hard with that, Tamsin. I just want, like, it doesn't even matter what you do. It doesn't even have to be netball. But my God, if you work that bloody hard to be the best in your country at what you do, just enjoy it. Like, yeah, it's by far the biggest advice that you can definitely give. And so for the kids, like I was like, so I work in schools, prep to year 12, and I just go enjoyment first. Like, I just want you to love it. There's always a game at training. We've always got to have fun, and then we can knuckle down and get to the hard work. Then it's about being able to give. What I find nowadays, and it was probably always been like that, but I haven't been a coach, but that lack of resilience and how quickly they can drop their head when they throw a ball away. But I'm just like, who cares? I'm not going to get mad at you. Don't get mad at yourself. As long as you're trying and you want to get better, we can hone those skills. Those things can always get better. But you just want to enjoy what you do. And the other thing I found, if you play with enjoyment and energy within not only an individual, but a team, you don't have to be the better team, but you can beat the other team because you can put them off their game because of how strong and united you are. And actually, I had an example of that with my year 12s tonight. We beat a team, we were down 2-6 in the first quarter, and we came back to win by 5 because they just didn't give up. And the other team got so annoyed that we didn't give up that they gave up. You know, it's almost like a game of who's going to give up. But if you go out, enjoy each other's company, try really hard for one another. I say to my girls, as long as you're trying, I can coach you. But as soon as you drop your head, you're in on your own because there's nothing that I can fix about that.
Well, I love that. I want to know, if you're so calm now you're coaching in the Vixen setup with the defence specialist, do you turn around to them and go, guys, as long as you're trying, I don't mind?
No, I'm not as nice to the Vixens. I actually, it's so funny. Simone always tells me, she's like, Sharni, you've got really high standards and you need to lower them. So I'm like, all right. Because, you know, when you're involved with a team like the Vixens, who are just incredible, they're just the most amazing athletes and humans, and I just love being around them. But they're already the best at what they do. It's not about coaching them. It's about making them feel good about themselves and giving them the belief so that their pure skills can come to form each and every game. Because if they're all playing their best, then there's no one that can stop them. So it's about, you know, a little bit of tactical, a little bit of kind of being hard, but it's about focusing on what they can do and what they can do well and getting them to do that consistently so they believe it in themselves.
Yeah, well, it's amazing. It's quite interesting because I obviously do all my research for Chat to Guest, and I didn't realise you were back in the Vixen setup. Has it been a breath of fresh air to step back into a professional environment?
Oh, yeah, I've just loved it. I think I'm so grateful for Simone for reaching out. I had a few years out. I commentated for a few years. But as you know, and, you know, it's no secret, I've always had my, you know, ups and downs with netball as a sport and trying to fit in but not fitting in and being myself, but that doesn't necessarily get taken that well within the sport. And I think for Simone to call me and go, Shans, would love to get you in, like, sometimes you just want to feel valued, and I haven't always felt that way. And to hear her say that, I was like, oh my, like I was like, I just don't know how I can help you guys, but if I can, amazing. So I'll do everything for you. I'll cut up some vision. I'll give you some tips. But I always put a little bit of a disclaimer at the end being like, just PS, this is only my opinion. So if you don't want to do it, don't do it. Because then I don't feel guilty if it doesn't work. But I was really nervous because, as I said, I'd like reverted back to grassroots where my passion and joy is, and seeing females be active and playing sport and staying in community sport is so important to me. And then I was really nervous going back in, but they're just the most, as I said, the most beautiful team, the most beautiful girls, and they just make me feel so welcome all the time. And it's just such a great, it's no surprise that they're playing as well as what they are because of how beautiful they are. Like, yes, they're very skilled athletes, but how much care and love they have for one another. And I'll never forget, my sports psych always said to me, care is number one. If you know your teammates care about you, then you'll be willing to do anything for them. So, and they definitely have that.
Well, listen, Sharni, I could ask a million questions. We didn't even get onto the AFLW, which means we're going to have to talk to you again at other point. But I always finish my podcast with sort of a statement, or sort of I've asked coaches who they, if they could take any team. I've described some players of what they're like. I don't think there's one statement I could come up with for you. I don't think it does you justice. So you've always been to me a force of nature. Your personality has absolutely shone. And when I speak to people about you, you wouldn't believe the amount of people go, she's my idol. It casually just gets thrown around that Sharni's, and you still are, right, to so many people. So I just wonder, in a world where, especially female sport, I find, well, actually, no, across all sports really, male and female, personalities are so bashed down. People are fearful to say things, fearful to have an opinion, fearful to just be a bit different. And I always talk about sport need the good, the bad, the ugly, everything in between. It's an entertainment business. How important has it been to be unapologetically you? Because it's come at a cost at times, right? And you talked a little bit about your commentary and standing up for things, and it's not always been the easy ride doing that, but it's still so integral for you being you.
Yeah, for me, the most important thing is that I can sleep at night, to be honest with you. And I think everyone should know what their values are. Like, if you don't know what your values are, then you need to sit down and figure it out. There's plenty of exercises if you can Google it online, but you need to know what your values are and you need to stick by them. And those that struggle with mental health or are a bit lost in life are generally those that have strayed away from their values. And like commentating is a great example. Like, I absolutely loved it. It was a great job. I got to do what I loved, which was talk about netball and get paid for it. But when political issues come up that I don't agree with, then I'm not going to shy away from talking about it, because why should you? When everyone's too scared to speak up, and I get not everyone's in a position where they can speak up, and people want and need to keep their jobs, and I can totally respect that. But for me, I know that I'll always have work. It might be coaching netball, it might be picking up horse. I don't really care. I'll always have a job. But as long as I can go to bed at night knowing that I'm contributing to a better earth, then that is what I want to do. Yeah, I think, for me, it's just always, as I said, I just had a really strong upbringing in regards to trusting yourself and learning how to trust yourself. And I stuff up all the time, and I probably say the wrong things all the time, but I learn from it. And I think you go, oh, yep, I could have said that better. Or, yep, I definitely could have said that differently. But you learn from it. And if you don't speak up, then you don't learn from those experiences. So I love an awkward conversation. They're just one of my favourite things, because I never take anything personally, a difference of opinion. And if push comes to shove, I just say, well, let's just agree to disagree and leave it at that.
One of the most unique things I find with people that are very successful, people that have done things differently, is this ability to have self-reflection and self-awareness. And I say it's such an underrated trait in players. We throw words around like accountability and being in good culture and being a good teammate. That self-awareness and what you bring to the table is absolutely huge. And Sharni, once again, speaking to you, you can see that is hugely been an important part of who you are and why that success has come, whether you've seen it at the time or not. But listen, you've been absolutely incredible to speak to, as always. Our listeners will be thrilled that you're on, because you are absolutely adored in the UK. And anytime you want to come back and do some coaching with us or come and do some stuff, you've been more than welcome.
Oh my God.
Sure. But listen, keep in touch. I'll be looking out to see whether Vixen's defence line get the championship this year. We'll see. You've got a big ash. You've got to stop fever at some point. So good luck with that.
I know. Yeah, they are tough. Far out. The 2-point shot is a killer. It's
Yeah.
an absolute killer. But
Well,
anyway,
back
no, I know. It's going to be, it's been a very interesting season over here. But I just want to say I'm really excited for the UK League. And what I would love is for the UK to push so hard that it challenges the Super Netball to be the number one league. Because I think if you can get that up and running and if you can get commercial partners in that will push it, you could be the number one league in the world. And I think that that's really exciting. I think that Super Netball is at a point where it's going well, but it's struggling to grow in such a big sports market over here. And I'm sure it's the same over there. But I say, and I will call him out every day of the week, Richard Branson, there should be a Virgin Netball League every day of the week because, the possibilities with netball are endless. We're just yet to see anyone nail it.
I am a true believer in all of that, Sharni, and I'll back you whenever you get Richard Branson on the phone. So don't even worry about it. Listen, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks everybody for listening and keep in touch.
Hey, Root.